talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Finished the season last year, disappointing, 14-3.
Right?
Yeah, well, they lost their I'm going to mix it up. They lost their coach, obviously. He was canned. Kyler Murray got a big bag of money. They were 18th in yards per game passing, and they were 18th in passing yardage. So they were, in their passing game, they weren't the worst in the league. That being said, because they had to. They were losing constantly. They were playing from behind. So that's another note to make for this year in fantasy wise. These guys are going to be playing from behind. There's going to be garbage time for this team. And yeah, it may be Colt McCoy to start the season, then maybe Kyler Murray to finish. And I'll talk a little bit about like why I like to get him late in drafts, but that's a team that's going to be doing it. They only had 17 touchdown passes. They were bottom 6 in that. And they were top 10 in sacks allowed last year too, as well. So not a great team offensively to have. That being said, it doesn't mean that there's not any weapons to grab in this offense. They were bottom half in rush attempts and rushing touchdowns. Obviously that correlates with the fact that they had to pass a lot more. So let's dive into a couple players. I'll read up a couple stats, and I want your thoughts, Chris, on where you would be taking this guy in. So let's start with James Conner here. In the fully healthy games last year, he averaged about 16 carries a game. He averaged about 4.1 yards per carry. He had 57 total targets and 45 receptions for 292 yards, about 24 yards a game. But he finishes the RB20 in just 12 games. Where do you see his value going into this year? Do you see if he played a full season last year, I said that he probably would have ended up top 12 because he was just a pivotal part of that offense. But where do you see him this season?
I mean, I think he's outside the RB1 category, but I think he's probably in that 15 range. This is a guy I'm looking to draft in the fifth or sixth round. He's going to be there with other guys like Cam Akers that I think. Yeah, we talked about the zero RB strategy, and he's one of the guys that we like for the zero RB strategy. But here's my biggest concern is that even though he is targeted a fair amount in terms of the passing game, they're going to be behind in a lot of games. And if you look across their receiving board, like there's no down the field. They're all small guys, right? And so I can assume that some of those dink and dunk kind of safety valve passes are going to go towards the receivers and less to James Conner. This is it's really hard for me to like fall in love with this guy and be like, oh yeah, I love him. I'm going to go draft him in the 3rd or 4th round. It's really hard because his offense is going to be bad. And
I agree with you. That's high up to get him anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 5th and 6th round is a really good spot for him, and that's where I'd be looking to go and get him. But with the offensive line being the way it is, I mean, the defense is not very good. It's a new head coach, so who knows what kind of schemes that they're going to have for the passing attack. I don't really like any.
I mean, he still averaged about 5 targets before his injury in week 5, like those first 4 games.
Yeah, so, don't get me wrong. I have him in my top 20. Don't get me wrong. Like I like him enough to where I would go and draft him, but I can't really make an argument for him jumping into the top 12. Like this is a guy that I think everyone at this point knows how I feel about Bijan, and this is a guy that Bijan is clearly better than, like, and way more valuable too, because even if he's going to have a more limited role, like James Conner should get the volume that I suspect Bijan is not going to get, but that doesn't matter. Like there's this offense just isn't good enough to be able to sustain a top end running back. And Colt McCoy actually
doesn't mean he won't get bell cow usage. It just means like you're not going to have a top end running back coming out of his team.
Look at his average. It's not anything special. I mean, it's over 4 yards a carry, but it's barely over 4 yards a carry. So it's not this huge. We weren't seeing. I think his biggest damage that he made was in the receiving game. He had these big breakoff receptions on, just a screen pass or, this just a red alert play. So with the touchdown numbers,
here's the only thing I'll say about him is the fact that he is 64th overall right now at running back 26 in standard ADP right now, which I think is a crime to James Conner. I mean, it's more or less because people are expecting this team to go 4-13 all over again, which there's not much pointing the needle in another direction to me. I mean, even Vegas has them at 4.5 at the line. So that being said, to me, I'm thinking it's a steal if you get him at that 64th overall pick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that. Like I think he's going to be better than that just based on how it is.
I mean, the thing is, we're expecting the Rams to be better, and if we're expecting the Rams to be better, we know what San Francisco is, and we think that Seattle can repeat what they did last year. And if that's the case, they're going to have two really good teams in their division and a halfway decent team in their division, and
Yeah.
they're going to have to be chasing points, and that doesn't leave much for the running back. If they were in games, and we'll see when Kyler gets back, this can be a totally different team, right? Their offense could be a little bit more high powered. I would agree with you. I think Kyler's a guy that you can target late in the drafts, and that's kind of a steal, especially if you're in like a keeper league where no one's going to draft him in the top 6 rounds, probably in the top 9 rounds, and so you can go get him in the 10th or 11th round, and if he comes back healthy, he's going to be back next year. So holding on to him as a stash, and you can go and draft a guy like Derek Carr, Jared Goff, and then Kyler in the round after, and have a guy early season. And then if Kyler pans out, if this offense, does do something, and is not getting like poked with the proverbial stick to do something, then Kyler could be a sneaky pick. There's a couple other guys I like as sneaky picks here and late round.
Well, I mean, let's just talk about Kyler before we move on. I mean, Kyler
Sure.
Murray here, he's ADP 153. He's quarterback 23. That means there's 22 other quarterbacks that if you are grabbing one of them, like for example, you said Goff, but I mean, someone like Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, any of these guys that you get later on because you fade quarterback and you fill your team with anything else, go grab Kyler Murray. That's my advice, because you grab Kyler Murray and he comes back second half of the season. He comes back the first third of the season. He may be in a position where, maybe he doesn't scramble for the 400, 50, 500 yards that he's doing coming off the ACL injury. But the guy is an accurate passer. He's got a rapport with Hollywood Brown and his other people. He knows how to play football. And they're going to want, I mean, I don't think they'll rush him back that soon. But if you go into your playoffs with someone like Kyler Murray, who has opportunity to be throwing the ball, especially more in garbage time, I think you may have a, I wouldn't call it a cheat code, because I don't think without his running ability is really going to be a cheat code, but you're going to be better off than maybe running out Matt Stafford in your playoffs, because you just have a higher ceiling sometimes in that case, because he's just going to throw the ball way more times. Yeah. But again, it is a sneaky pick to make. He played in 10 games healthy last year, not including the game where he tore his ACL on the first drive. And at the end of the day, he had 14 touchdowns, 7 picks. He's a good quarterback. He threw for 2359 at that point. So he played a little over a half a season. He probably would have been close to 4,000 yards on the season, just because the volume of passing at this team.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to get that, and that's where I kind of like some of these receivers in a late round. I don't. If you pull up the ADP on Marquise Brown for me for a second, and then I'll talk about the other guys first, like Rondell Moore and Greg Dortch, where those guys are going to be essentially undrafted, or you can get them in the 14th and 15th round. And someone has to catch balls there, right? Like they're going to be behind in games, and someone's going to have to catch the balls. And if Marquise Brown is not going to be the only guy catching balls there, and with Zach Ertz hitting the PUP list, and I think Zach Ertz is going to be back, and I think he's actually a really sneaky tight end guy that you can get.
I have a sleeper tight end for him too.
Yeah, really, really late, and he's.
I've got some good numbers for him as well. Yeah, we can talk about
when Kyler gets back too, especially. Then I think Zach Ertz can be a guy that can really perform late in the season for you.
Let's talk Hollywood Brown then for in this case. He's going overall ADP 76. This is right now, we're talking about late July. So these numbers are going to change, but he's 32nd receiver off the board as the number one on his team, which is really interesting because everybody else is around him. I guess you can argue Deontay Johnson is the number one and Evans is the number one on his team, and they're right there too as well. But everybody else right above him are all kind of 1B or 1A, or they're the number 2 receiver on their team. So he's not getting the love in a garbage time guy. And in the 6 games without D-Hop last year, and I'm going to hammer this home, because I think Colt McCoy is a serviceable quarterback for this team and
I do
can get
too.
Hollywood the ball. He had 64 targets, 43 catches, 485 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He had 10 targets a game, seven catches a game, and he had roughly average of 80 yards a game. And the last 5 weeks with Colt McCoy, he still averaged, and that was with D-Hop, still averaged 7 targets a game. So, and that was playing a role when D-Hop was getting fed like 14 targets a game. So to me, it just shows that Colt McCoy can service a Hollywood Brown, and Hollywood Brown can be the number one guy without D-Hop there, especially because of the volume of passing that they're going to have. I'm taking him ahead of his ADP all day in drafts because I'm afraid to let him try and fall to that 30-second receiver, because I think there's people who are going to look at it and be like, oh, I can get Hollywood Brown instead of picking up, DJ Moore. I can get Hollywood Brown instead of picking up Chris Godwin. It's like those are the other guys that are Tyler Lockett, these other guys that you're hoping for these games who I think are great receivers, but you're going to get a guy who's going to be the number one target on his offense all season.
I don't know.
Regardless of throwing the ball.
I kind of disagree with you with a couple of those guys. Like, I'd probably take him over Deontay Johnson. I'm taking Tyler. Yep. I'm smashing Tyler Lockett all day over Marquise Brown, all day.
And Tyler Lockett's one ahead of him. He's just one ahead of him,
and he deserves to be.
But DJ Moore's 10 ahead of him.
I'll take DJ Moore ahead of him.
10 receivers ahead of him.
Yeah.
See, that's where I differ. But
I can't see again. We're assuming that he's going to step into a D-Hop role. He's not D-Hop.
No, we're expecting him to do what he did without D-Hop.
Sure, but like, do we expect this offense,
which literally was putting him on pace for like almost 1,300 yards? It was 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. That was his pace in the first 6 games of the season.
I'm not going to go by pace. All right, and you can't project. Yeah,
but that's the only. I know, that's the only way you could truly look at it, though.
I know, but you can't project out season-long stats over a 6-game spread, and you can't just say this guy's going to have 1,300 yards. Like,
correct, but I still say, but a 6-game spread is a good sample size. That's not a teaspoon of sample. That's a whole tablespoon of sample size right there. It's a third of the season that he was playing elite football as a wide receiver.
Right, with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, but I'm saying he still did it he still was going 7 targets a game at the end of the season with Colt McCoy and D-Hop in there too as well.
Sure, Deontay Johnson was getting seven targets a game.
Yeah, but Hollywood Brown obviously did something different with it. But I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just I'm giving my advice out there. Yeah. I like him. I'm taking him ahead of his ADP. If you're in the middle, like, here's one of the advices in drafting. If you're in the middle rounds, you can take a chance on somebody falling to your ADP because the chance of them getting to you is a little bit easier. Whereas you're on the end, you sometimes have to take a shot, like we said, is take a shot at a guy. And here's a guy that if I'm at one of the corners on the turns, I'm taking a shot ahead of his ADP if I want him on my team. And I do. I think he's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, at least in our league, maybe in other leagues that I'm in, I might go and draft him in this position. But like, at least in our league, where I would want to draft him, I'm not going to be able to because my keepers are going to be in the 6th and 7th round, and so he's going to be gone in those 2 rounds, and I'm not going to go and draft him in the 5th round, and he's probably going to be gone by the 8th. No, it doesn't. I'm not going to go and draft him in the 5th round. There's going to be other if he's available in the 5th round, there's going to be other people available that I like better. Again, I would take Tyler Lockett, DJ Moore. I would probably take him over Deontay Johnson. But yeah, Godwin I would take over him. I think Godwin's going to have a great season. I probably would still take Evans. I have Evans as a bust, and I'd still probably take Evans over him just on potential.
Okay. Well, we'll finish up here with Zach Ertz. He's ADP 184, tight end 23. So you can not even draft him if you want to just wait, and you can take him off the waivers, or you could take him at the last pick in your draft, whatever you want. I think he's a sleeper. I mean, he had 68 targets before his injury, caught 46 balls for 394 and 4 touchdowns. He had 7.5 targets per game. And that was a lot. All that was it was pretty much before D-Hop came into the picture and then commanded a massive target share. So that being said, out of that season so far, you could see that tight end is going to have a role with the Cardinals because, like you said, the other guys are not downfield threats as much. They're all short, small, intermediate guys. And the tight ends are going to create the mismatches where they're going to be able to take a little bit deeper shots and have a little bit more of a depth of target than these smaller receivers at more cases, especially because Christian Kirk as soon as Christian Kirk vacated, that deep threat was gone. So Hollywood Brown is your field spreader, and you've got the underneath with the tight end. So Trey McBride, Zach Ertz, I think these guys are going to feed just on volume alone. And so if you're looking for a tight end because you faded it all the way at the end and you go to pick 2, I wouldn't be afraid to pick up someone like Ertz just because the sheer volume is going to be there and there's not much competition.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this on Ertz is that, like, I completely agree with you. I'm like, in the 15th round, I would go and draft him. So even though his ADP is not being drafted, I would go and draft this guy in the later rounds, in the 14th or 15th round. Go and get yourself, if you miss out on the top 4 or 5 tight ends, right? If you miss out on Kittle and Kels and Andrews and Hawkinson, and you end up getting a guy like Freiermuth or even Pitts, go and draft Ertz with your last pick. And just because if those guys are inconsistent or they don't pan out, Ertz is going to be a wait and see. But I think when Kyler comes back, he's going to be extremely valuable at the tight end position. So you might have to roster him, but I would rather roster him for 4 or 5 weeks and wait for Kyler to get back than have to fight in waivers for him. Especially if I'm a guy that doesn't have a tight end, a top tier tight end. I mean, I'd probably still with Pitts. There's a couple of guys I'd probably still I wouldn't go and draft him, but I think Schultz is a great guy to pair him up with. Go and draft Schultz, go and grab Ertz. If you go and grab Gesicki and go and grab Ertz later,
even Cole Kmet, someone like Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing about Ertz, and the last thing I'll say, because we don't need to hammer on a guy who we're still unsure what his status is going to be early on, but last year he got hurt week 10 against the Rams. He only played 13% of those snaps. So I'm not even counting that game. So 9 games. In 9 games that he was a top 7 tight end for those 9 games. And he was never higher than tight end 16. So like that just tells you his value in that team and the availability. And that was even when D-Hop came back. He still had a tight end 7, a tight end 6 game. He finished tight end 19 in 9 games. So you can just see the value that he has. He's still a good talent. In the year prior to the first year with Arizona, I think he finished as tight end 11 in standard, tight end 5 or 6 in PPR. So he's a great tight end. He's aging, he's older, but the guy's fantastic. You could argue that him and Kels were the two to like really start the whole tight end.
Jason Witten.
Yeah. So that's it for the Cardinals. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think about the Cardinals if you're even drafting anybody. So let's move on. We'll talk about the Seattle Seahawks, 9-8 last year.